Hello everybody! I'm back with yet another book review! I've read 3 more books. Surprise, surprise. Let's just jump straight into it. The first book, or series of books that I read, was The Lord of the Rings. Now, I haven't read The Hobbit yet. I'm still waiting for my library to have a copy ready for me. But I did read the trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. The Lord of the Rings is broken up into 3 different physical books, 3 separate physical books. But inside those books, there are 2 books each. So there's 6 books total, but there's only 3 books. Does that make sense? There's 2 books in each book. They're labeled as being books as well, which really confused me because I started reading the second book, which is The Two Towers, and it said at the very beginning, book 3. And I was like, pretty sure this was the second book. I thought The Return of the King was the last book. Then I remembered that in The Fellowship of the Ring, you have book 1, where they escape the Shire, and book 2, where they go to the elf land and then start their journey from there with the whole group of people. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names. I do not remember everybody. Each book has its own plot with the rising action, the fall, and the continuing. But the way that they're alternated means you have to finish one book before you move on to the next book, even if the story is different. We lose Frodo and Sam, and we're focused on Merry and Pippin, and then we lose Merry and Pippin. Where did they go? And then we're with, I'm sorry, I don't remember their names, but the elf and the dwarf, because the man's dead, and we're following their story. And then Gandalf pops back up again, and then we're back with Merry and Pippin, but where's Frodo and Sam? Also, the fact that Sam names his pony Bill, I think is the best thing in the whole series. It is my favorite thing. I love it. I love it. It's really amazing how Tolkien formulates these stories to keep you reading. I'm normally not into high fantasy, but Tolkien builds the world in a way that intrigues you and writes the story in a way that captivates you. And so you can't put it down until you get to the end. I hated the end though, by the way. I wanted the Shire to remain pure. I wanted it to be above everything else. But humanity had to ruin things. And humanity ruining things being the main point of a book drives me nuts. Because humanity's already ruining things outside of books. And I'm in this high fantasy world for escaping, or for escapism, so I don't have to deal with humanity destroying things. And yet, in this high fantasy book, something so innocent and pure is completely destroyed by humanity, and it really hurts. It hurts. I'm sad. I'm gonna pretend that the last part of The Return of the King just didn't exist. Long story short, I give Lord of the Rings 4.5 stars out of 5. The next book that I read, I actually read for school. It's called The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. It is a beautiful series of little vignettes that follow the protagonist through her growing up in an impoverished community as a person of color. I honestly really loved this book. I thought it was super interesting. When you read her, I don't know if it's her foreword or her afterword, but when you read what she wrote about her book, you understand sort of why the book is written in the way that it is. She says it was because she wanted her stories to be accessible for everybody, that the people in her community, even though they may not be literate or super fluent in English, they deserved pretty little stories too. And so this is a book full of pretty little stories. And I'm not kidding when I'm saying little. Some of them don't even take up a full page. They are very small. I blew through this book. I absolutely loved it. I loved how it started out with a child's view on the world, and as the character grew up, her view changed and shifted as one's view of the world changes and shifts as one grows up. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really well done. I absolutely loved it. I don't know if she has any other works, but if she does, I'm going to check them out because it was amazing. I loved it. I loved it so much, and I'm so glad I got the opportunity to read it. So I give The House on Mango Street 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend. It doesn't take long to read, and it is an amazing book. There are a few trigger warnings, so look those up and be cautious if you are triggered by those things. And the last book that I'm going to discuss today is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I don't know if I pronounced that right, and I'm very sorry if I didn't. I like Marquez's work. I read Love in the Time of Cholera because it was also on this poster that I'm reading through, and reading 100 Years of Solitude is on the same level. It's absolutely amazing. A lot of 100 Years of Solitude is almost absurdist. It's clearly not the real world because there are things like magic, but are there things like magic, or are we just confused? It was a wild ride from beginning to end. Every time I told somebody that I was reading 100 Years of Solitude, they all said, "Oh wow, that's an interesting book," and then proceeded to explain a storyline that I was just not getting from the book. So I don't know if I misread, if they misread, or if we read two entirely different books altogether. 100 Years of Solitude basically follows the story of this town that is separated from the rest of the world by a marsh. It's a Spanish town, but it's also an Indian town, like Indian town, which is confusing because, I mean, I'm not great at geography, but Spain and India are rather far apart. So I'm not sure where they were on a map, but I don't think they were either. And it follows the story of this one family as they grow up. There's the founder of the town who's obsessed with magic and alchemy. There's his son, there's commanders, there's women and their children, and it's so complex. And a lot of the characters have the same name. It's so difficult to follow, but I loved every second of it because it's so absurd. There's so many small details where you listen to what happened or you see what happened and you go, what? What was that? What was that? And I absolutely loved it. The way Marquez writes is gorgeous. It's little views into humanity, into nature, in a way that doesn't pull you out of the story, but actually brings you further in, and I love it. I give 100 Years of Solitude 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend. It is a bit of a committed read because it is very confusing, and it's a bit longer, so if you don't have a full attention span, if you don't give your full attention and commitment to this book, you're going to be so lost. So lost. I was reading it by itself, and I couldn't. I had to go back constantly. I think this book maybe took the longest of all the books that I have read so far this year, and that's saying something. But I enjoyed every second of it, which is not something I can say about some other long books. So, highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. If you're not into absurdist literature, then it might not be for you because it really leans heavily into this. It's almost real, but not quite. You have to suspend your disbelief in order to fully enjoy the story. And I know some people just don't like doing that. So those were the books that I read this time. Let me know if you've read them down below and what you thought. If there's any books that you've read recently that you absolutely love, please let me know. I'm always looking for new books to add to my list. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!